So I've seen a post. It's not necessarily the same post, but there are similar posts going around on different social media sites um that are being spread around. It is propaganda. Um the first time I saw it and read through it, I was really taken aback. So the claim that was being made that I didn't think was, first of all, in good taste, and I also thought it was racist and Islamophobic, was that Palestinians, the Palestinian people, their history is intertwined with Nazism. So this is the post here. It's very long. We will zoom in on it. I want to zoom in down here. Here's some pictures that were included in the post. Content warning: anti-Semitism, Hamas terrorism, Nazis, Holocaust, etc. This post will be addressing the neo-Palestinians and their Nazi origins. To all those supposed leftists supporting the Palestinian regime, you should probably learn even the most basic history before you go espousing support for a far-right government led by a terrorist group. Also, choosing to jump to supporting the Palestinian government instead of supporting the Palestinian people, who are just as much a victim of the evil far-right Hamas regime, is a very odd and telling choice. Before I move on anywhere from here, I think that it is important to say that I there's a very small group. There's a very small group of people who call themselves leftists that are all out for Palestinian government. Okay, which is an odd choice because the Palestinian people don't even support their government, and they did not choose their government. And what I mean by this is Hamas was democratically elected in 2006. They have not held an election since then, and most of the people that live in Gaza were either not old enough to vote then, not old enough to vote now, or were not even born when they were elected. Okay? So we need to separate the two of these things completely. Okay? So let's move on from that. Let's go to the next one. It should also be said before I get into some history that the deaths of innocent Israelis is just as horrific as the deaths of innocent Palestinians. If you feel otherwise, you should really ask yourself why that is, and for that matter, how you manage to sleep at night. And we'll address this as well. I don't think that innocent civilians anywhere should be killed. I think that it is wrong. It's it's disgusting to just outright kill innocent civilians. It is also a crime, okay, but it is not genuine to not address the power imbalance here, okay? So when we're talking about, we need to also be focusing on the deaths of innocent Israelis when we're talking about the deaths of innocent Palestinians. We're talking about an ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people in Israel right now, whereas the Israeli deaths was one attack by the government, the Gazan leadership. Let's be clear that attack, regardless of its horrific outcome, was a reaction to something that has been happening for a very long time. Once again, I do not agree with civilians being killed, but ignoring that fact is odd, and it is no way to actually address the history of the area. Okay. The pictures you see here are Haj Amin al-Husseini serving as the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and a key figure in Palestinian Arab nationalism during the 20th century. In these photos, he is seen meeting with Hitler in the 1930s to discuss different ways to eradicate the local indigenous Jewish population. Yes, indigenous Jewish population. Jews have called Israel their home for nearly 4,000 years, and in those 4,000 years, they have survived genocide after genocide and have had their lands systematically stolen from them. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit here. This is where we start getting into, and by the way, this is the Grand Mufti here. This is where we start getting into a lot of deep history that is not being addressed here in any sort of way. First of all, this post is correct. There are many Jewish people who are indigenous to that area. There's also indigenous, there are Christian people who are originally from that area as well as Muslim people. Jewish people, the Jewish population before the occupation made up about 5% of the total population. I'm not sure about how much the Christian population made up for, but the Muslim population was a vast majority of that population. But I do want to say it was a secular nation of many religions that lived majorly in somewhat of peace before the occupation started happening. Okay, let's see here. Amin al-Husseini, serving as the Grand Mufti. So something we need to address with him. He was not appointed by the Palestinian people. He was appointed by the British government at the time, because at this point in history, Palestine was already under British rule. Okay, when we talk about the Israeli state and when it started to form, we're talking about the Balfour Declaration, or the Balfour Agreement, and that was signed in 1917, I believe. And that was an agreement that the British government signed with European Jewish people that promised them Palestine as their Jewish state. That was signed in 1917. So let's once again go back to the Grand Mufti here. So he was appointed by the British government. By the time he met up with Hitler, and I believe it was in 1935 or something like that, he had exiled from Palestine. He had traveled all across the Middle East and Europe, place to place with his crew of people. And he was, in fact, a Nazi. He was. He had exiled himself and traveled around, and he finally landed in Germany and met up with Hitler, where he supported what Hitler was doing. He absolutely did. Let me just read further, just to make sure I'm not missing anything in here right now. Amin al-Husseini turned to Hitler and the Nazis as an attempt to prevent the reestablishment of Israel. Emphasis on reestablish. Israel was still being established, as we already went over. It was beginning to be established in 1917. That is when that agreement between the British government and European Jewish people was signed. He turned even more to Nazi Germany for support in furthering his nationalist objectives. He visited Nazi Germany, meeting high-ranking officials, including Hitler himself. His aim was to gain Nazi assistance in opposing Jewish immigration and reclamation of their stolen land. Part of his Nazi collaboration was preaching translated Nazi anti-Semitism ideology into Arabic and radio broadcasting, incitement to violence against Jews. His fascist anti-Semitic teachings are still deeply rooted in far-right neo-Palestinian movements to this day. At the end of the day, groups like Hamas only care about one thing, from the river to the sea, which is the ethnic cleansing and killing of every last Jew in Israel. So maybe before you mindlessly share another meme, do some basic research and learn the history that brought us to where we are today. I did do that. So let's go back a little bit. A lot of this is true. A lot of this is true. During World War II, there were Nazi broadcasts in Palestine that were translated to Arabic, that were on the radio stations, and they would oftentimes play them in cafes, things like that. And they were trying to turn the population of Palestine into Nazis, basically, and turn them against Jewish people. So here's where it starts to get a little untrue. Okay. This is implying that worked. The implication here is that worked. Okay, so it didn't work. I've been trying to find any sort of source anywhere that says that there was a large number of Palestinian Nazis anywhere, and I have not been able to find that. And we're also going to talk about From the River to the Sea here in just a moment, but I've been trying to find a source that says that there were a large population of Palestinian Nazis anywhere, because I am dedicated to finding the truth. If that is the truth, I want to know it. I haven't found that anywhere. What I did find was this article from Haaretz. If you don't know Haaretz, it is a publication. It is the oldest Israeli publication in history. It began in 1918, 1 year after the Balfour Agreement was signed. Let me sign into this so I can. 12,000 Palestinians fought for UK in World War II alongside Jewish volunteers, historian finds. Sparking an uproar in 2015, Netanyahu argued prominent Palestinian leader played an important role in Hitler's plan to annihilate the Jews, but Professor Mustafa Abbasi says Palestinians were not at all looking to aid Nazis. In 2015, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sparked an uproar when he claimed that Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini was the one who urged Hitler to annihilate the Jews. In the wake of the criticism this elicited, Netanyahu said his intention was not to absolve Hitler of responsibility for the Holocaust, but to note that Mufti played an important role in the final solution. But it turns out there was another side to the story that also escaped mention by Netanyahu. The historian's son, the forgotten role played by thousands of Palestinians who did not heed the Mufti of Jerusalem's call to support the Axis countries and went so far as to take up arms to fight the Nazis, often shoulder to shoulder with young Jews from mandatory Palestine. Professor Mufta Abbasi, a historian at Tel Hai Academic College, has spent years tracing their story. Having recently published an academic article on the subject this week, he suggested an opposite narrative to the one Netanyahu put forward. The prime minister had sought to paint the Palestinians as supporters of the Third Reich, but Abbasi says the Mufti did not find a receptive audience among the Palestinians for his call to aid the Nazis. Not at all. So there's more in here. But essentially what they're saying is that it didn't work. The propaganda didn't work on the Palestinians. They were not having it. And they took up arms alongside Jewish people and fought against the Axis in World War II. Okay, 12,000. I did the math, by the way. I did the math using census data. 12,000 volunteers accounts for 1 in every 38 people that was in Palestine at the time. So 1 in every 38 people in Palestine at the time volunteered to go to war on the side of the Allies to fight against the Nazis. Okay? That is not a small number for voluntary service of this kind. Okay? So this is where I'm getting. This is the problem that I'm having here. Is that this is many people who share these things are sharing them from a place of, I think that Palestinians should be alive, but also they can be in the wrong, and here's why. But they're not doing their due diligence and claiming that nobody else is doing their due diligence. Okay? So I've done mine. Okay? So when people are claiming that there is a Nazi culture deeply rooted in Palestinian culture, it is completely disingenuous, first of all. And second of all, completely false. 12,000 Palestinians voluntarily went to war against the Nazis in World War II. And this post is claiming that they were all Nazis in World War II. And because of the Grand Mufti, whom they didn't even appoint, the British government appointed them, because the Grand Mufti agreed with Hitler that every Palestinian is deeply rooted in Nazism. Okay? This is racism. This is Islamophobia being perpetuated. This is Benjamin Netanyahu's words being echoed on social media. Okay? We know this is false. We have the research. This is false. Look, and here's this. I brought this up. This is from the Jerusalem Post. The Palestinians must acknowledge their role in the Holocaust. Opinion. An opinion piece. I read through this. It is essentially saying the same thing that the Facebook post is. It is saying that the Grand Mufti sided with the Nazis, and because of that, and because of his propaganda campaign, that the Palestinians were Nazis, and they took a big part in the Holocaust. These are false. The Grand Mufti may have taken a part in this, but the Palestinian people did not. Okay? We could touch on the From the River to the Sea really quick, because this is also something that is just not true. The history of From the River to the Sea has never meant anything other than the freedom of Palestinians from violent occupation. Okay? We know this. I'm not pulling up articles. I'm not pulling up pages. I'm not pulling up sources. Google it. You can literally Google. That's the easiest one to Google. The reason why I wanted to talk about everything else here is because there are articles out there, but you have to search for certain things in order to get articles that actually have to do with history. Because of the mass propaganda campaigns that try and paint Palestinians as disgusting, evil monsters, it is hard to find the actual history, okay? And I'm not saying that I am ignoring anything that is on this page here. Many of the stuff in here is correct. But what they are ignoring is they are ignoring them. They're ignoring them. Okay? They're ignoring the people, the many, by and large, people of Palestine who ignored that propaganda and recognized what it was for what it was and joined up arms with the Allies in World War II. Okay? Sources and comments. Also, I don't want to see any comment accusing me of supporting the far-right, anti-democratic Netanyahu government. He is a joke and shares a lot of blame in all of this. This is something that Netanyahu consistently perpetuates. Okay? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is a big reason why I wanted to talk about this. Is that when people share things like this, they may or may not have good intentions. I don't know. It's hard for me to say good intentions because when I see this, this is clearly racism, Islamophobia. You know, when I see this, it's hard to say that somebody would have good intentions posting this. But what you are doing is you are being a mouthpiece for genocide. That's it. Whether you agree or, I mean, if you claim to be anti-genocide of the Palestinian people and you are sharing things like this, you are doing the work for genocide. These are the things that people who are pro-genocide are sharing and want you to share, because this is a dehumanization campaign. It's a dehumanization campaign that is racist and Islamophobic. It's gross. It's not true. And it's getting really frustrating seeing constantly everywhere I look, people making claims and then telling people that they haven't done enough research to have an opinion on it. You haven't done enough research, so you can't have an opinion on it. Here's my research. And then I do an hour's worth of research. I do an hour's worth of research and find out that none of it's true. It's not true. I mean, of course, there are some small details in this that were true, but you're leaving out the big part, which is that no, Nazism isn't deeply rooted in Palestinians.